Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to welcome all of you to our special event today. My name is Ankur Khator, and I have been a volunteer with Asha for Education for close to a year now. I strongly believed in bringing reforms through the medium of education and thus found a strong resonance with Asha's vision. For those of you who are joining our event for the very first time, Asha for Education is a nonprofit dedicated towards bringing socioeconomic change in India primarily through the medium of education. Our Seattle chapter is one of the largest chapters supporting more than 35 grassroots projects in India. We are 100% volunteer driven and aspire to send more than 97% of the funds to our project partners. Charity Navigator has given Asha a perfect score for the last 7 years based on the transparency and accountability, and in 2020 recognized Asha as one of the top charities in the world providing COVID-19 relief to the most vulnerable sections of the society. Today, we are so thrilled to co-host this session with our partner, Avehi Abacus Project. The Avehi Abacus Project has been working in the field of education since 1990 with the goal of improving and strengthening the public education system so as to reach to the marginalized sections of the society and to impact the mainstream policy on education. Since its inception, it has developed three integrated packages of educational materials supplementing the public curriculum, and these packages have been received and appreciated by students, teachers, and policymakers. For 3 decades, this unique educational innovation has been sustained on a large scale across more than 1,000 schools and has supported more than 2.7 lakh kids. For the event today, we have a very special member of the Avehi team joining us. It is my absolute honor to introduce Ratna Pathak Shah. Ratna Pathak Shah is an actress with an interest in education and has worked with Avehi Abacus project since its inception. She is a founder member of Motley, a theater company in Mumbai which performs plays in Hindustani and English. She also acts in films and TV shows and has directed plays for children and adults. She has also conducted acting training workshops with schools and community centers. I personally have lost count of how many times I have watched every episode of Sarabhai versus Sarabhai and laughed at every dialogue of the epic Maya Sarabhai. Please join me in welcoming Ratna. Ratna, warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Awesome. And to drive the conversation, we also have Simantini Dhuru, Nandini Purandare, and Noela D'Souza joining this session. Simantini is the director of the Avehi Abacus project. She's a documentary filmmaker with many awards to her credit. She has been a member of several state and national policy-making bodies to which she has contributed her Avehi Abacus project experience, helping to modify and improve school and teacher education curriculum. Welcome, Simantini. And we also have Nandini, who has been involved with the Avehi Abacus project for over 20 years, thus developing an abiding interest in writing for education. She's a consulting economist and has worked with industry associations and Chamber of Commerce in this capacity. An avid trekker, she's honorary secretary of the Himalayan Club and editor of the annual Himalayan Journal. She's also currently co-writing a book on Himalayan community. Welcome, Nandini.
Thank you.
And last but not the least, we have Noella, who has been a member of the core team of Avehi Abacus project since 1997. She has been working in the field of education since 1976 in different states within India with communities of different social and economic backgrounds. She has also trained in psychotherapy and counseling and works mainly with women's rights and gender equality. Welcome, Noella. To our audience today, today's session offers you a great opportunity to learn more about Avehi and ask questions to Ratna and Avehi team. We will save the last 20 minutes just for your questions and we'll be moderating comments across all our platforms. So no matter where you're watching these, drop a comment and our moderators will help pick them up and get attended to. And lastly, Asha and Avehi cannot bring a positive impact without your support. We urge you to be generous with your donations to Asha so that we can continue to offer our support to projects like Avehi. Our team will be sharing the donation link all through the conversation. And now, without any further delay, I will now hand it over to Nandini to kick us off.
Hi, I'd like to begin by asking Simantini. So basically, in Avehi Abacus, uh, we try to field questions first, so that we can ask ourselves some questions and uh, um, reflect on them. So I'm going to be the one who's going to be asking the questions here today, and then give you a little chance to intervene if you feel like at the end, in the last 20 minutes. So I'd like to begin by telling Simantini to give us a broad context and overview of the project, and then we'll go on to more specific questions.
Thank you, Nandini, and thank you, Ankur, and thank you everyone at Asha Seattle and Asha everywhere in US for making this possible for us to talk about our work and share our experiences, and for being the foundation, the support, our partners for several decades, without whom we wouldn't have been able to have the confidence and the ability to reach out to schools and teachers. So to be very brief, because there is a lot of information and we will come to it in bits and pieces. Our work, Avehi Abacus, is a project of a trust called Avehi, which means to know, and that was started in the early 80s, in 1981. As the presence of media started increasing in our lives, presence of mass media, the people involved in Avehi at that point felt it was essential to energize community organizations, school teachers, and people working in health services to use media more actively for education, as well as to critically develop understanding for using media. And Avehi is a very unique kind of a place where it is a resource center of the variety of audiovisual material. Our work, in a sense, Avehi Abacus project, is started in 1990 formally. It has a background before this, about 40 years, at the cusp of independence, when our founder trustee of Avehi, Shanta Gandhi, a multifaceted person, at, as she retired and came to Bombay, it was felt that the work she had done in Adivasi villages at the beginning of 1950 and in several other places in her capacity as a theatre person should be should be looked at more carefully and should be taken to others, to school teachers. And it is then when we started working with one school, one municipal school in Bombay, with the idea that the work that we will do should reflect and feed into policy, for changing policy, for making education more transformative. And so on the go, we developed firstly a module called Sangati, which is for school children in the middle schools. Thereafter, as we were working with children and teachers in one school, we developed contact with more schools and experimented with working with teachers instead of the early model where our facilitator, Ratna, used to conduct the sessions in school. And after that, we worked with few more schools, like about 200 schools in rural and Adivasi settings, as well as started working, developing modules for supplementary teacher education curriculum, which is called Manthan. Recently, few years back, when the Delhi rape, the one that's known as the Nirbhaya rape happened, in fact, Noila came up with the idea of developing a module on gender, and we have Sat Sat, which is our third module. So today, and since last about 15 years, we have a presence in all the municipal schools, about 900 of them. The number of schools is reducing, but the number of classrooms has gone up. So about 2,000 classrooms at the beginning of the pandemic, roughly about 60,000 children per academic year, working with about 2,500 teachers per academic year. We also have worked outside Maharashtra using Sat in particularly in states of Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan with the local community organizations. I am going to stop here just by uh, again reiterating that we believe that education is part of society, that it's a social experience, and we look at ourselves as supplementing what is learned in schools to bridge the gap between the different subjects and bridge the gap between our life experiences and the content in schools. So with that, I hand over back to Nandini, so that I'm sure you would be eager to hear Ratna, and I don't want to come in the way. Thanks for now. Be back again.
Thank you, Seema. That was, although I've been with the project for over 20 years, these numbers never fail to amaze me. The kind of numbers we are dealing with, the schools, the students, the teachers, and the languages. It's quite amazing, but I'm sure Ratna will talk about it a bit more when I lead her with some questions. And if you have any questions for Seema, you are free to ask towards the end. But first, let's just get started with how it all began. So, Ratna, maybe you want to tell us about the earliest days, about your connect with Shantaji, and how she how the seed of Abacus was planted just way before it actually took shape. So, can you tell us about that?
Yes. Happily, you will probably have to stop me at some point because this is a subject that is very close to me and one that I'm very happy to talk about. Disclaimer, Shanta Gandhi, our founder trustee, as Seema was talking about, is my aunt, my maternal aunt. So I heard about this whole process of education from Shantaji when I was maybe about 10 or 11, 12 maybe. Even before that, because there used to be stories in the family about how Shantaji in the early 50s went off to Gujarat and on the banks of the Narmada in a very small village called Nikora, set up a school for Adivasi children. These were first generation learners. They had never been to school. There was no school around them for miles. And everyone suggested that she use the regular curriculum, but she thought that that wouldn't work with these kids because it really did not address their needs or their mindset or their way of looking at the world. So she devised a curriculum for the children along with them, along with their parents, and made it into a whole community experience. She lived there for 2 years and using everything that she knew, because as Seema pointed out, Shantaji was quite a multifaceted personality. She started off as a scientist, went to England to train to be a doctor, got involved with a dance company, and decided to change tracks. Came back to India, researched the Natya Shastra, worked as a writer, a playwright, and an educator, of course, in Nikora. taught at the National School of Drama, taught classical Indian drama, and eventually set up Bal Bhavan. But come back to Nikora. So here's this personality using everything that she can, all her skills, all her training, and talking to a bunch of kids who were for the first time being exposed to ideas that were completely outside their immediate experience. After Nikora, she fell ill and had to be shifted out of Nikora. Uh, but she moved to Ahmedabad and worked with the Gujarat Education Society there, using the same principles in an urban setting, seeing if that is possible. The idea behind the whole project, even then, was to keep the child at the center of the experience, to approach the experience of acquiring knowledge about the world, past, present, and future, to put together all these ideas in a way that makes sense to the child. So rather than dividing up things into subjects, she created sort of areas which were free flowing. You could go from one into another. I'll talk about it a little more in later. But at Gujarat Education Society, she tried out some of this work. Moved to Delhi and joined the National School of Drama at that point. But her interest in education continued. And in the 70s, she started working with the Bal Bhavan in Delhi. This is an organization which was set up to give children an extra curricular experience. So kids would come to Bal Bhavan post school. And these were largely children who went to the municipal schools in Delhi. These are publicly funded schools, often not looked after too well, I'm afraid. And the techniques of education are very basic, teacher oriented, teacher driven, information driven. Examination uh, was the final aim. And that's what most of us grew up in India. That was our experience of education in most cases. But Shantaji found a way in Bal Bhavan to extend that and to complement what they were learning in their schools with what they saw of life and what more they could derive from life. So Bal Bhavan became this experiment of absolutely amazing set of people working there. She just drew everyone together, all kinds of people, and was lucky enough to get support and the services of some absolutely amazing artists. Um, Motilal Karn, for example, who was a great Madhubani painter, worked with them. Musicians of all kinds worked with them. Sculptors worked with them. Scientists, Dr. Yashpal, who eventually was head of UGC, that's the University Grants Commission of India, and physicist, as far as I know. I'm not sure what kind of his specialization, but a highly respected scientist. He used to be in and out of Bal Bhavan all the time. She just drew all her friends and her experiences and her contacts together to make this an extremely vibrant place. And I remember going to Bal Bhavan as a child regularly because we made an annual visit to Shantaji's house in Delhi. And it was a fascinating place. I'd never seen anything like this. All the walls were covered with children's work, paintings, sculptures. Everyone danced, everyone sang. And yet there was a sense of great quiet on the campus. There used to be hundreds of kids all the time. And I found it totally fascinating. Um, Eventually, she tried to use the same thing in a way that was fairly similar to what we have done in the Avehi Abacus project to work with the Delhi municipal school system. It was called the Integrated Approach to Education at that point, that program. And they had finalized it, they had started teacher training, working with a set of municipal schools. And then, of course, the government changed and everything changed. So Shantaji eventually moved to Bombay when she retired from Bal Bhavan. Uh, Bombay, as it was called then, now Mumbai, and and along with Avehi, decided to set up the same project here, see if that's possible. And that's when we all came in. I remember walking into a room full of about 7, 8 women, all from different fields, all contributing all kinds of ideas, nobody making much sense. Shantaji with this single piece of paper saying, "These are our basic themes, and this is what we're going to work on," etc. And it used to be quite a riotous, quite a messy kind of situation, with everyone throwing in ideas and everyone arguing and everyone talking. And slowly, some people dropped out, some others came in. Seema came in. She was among the first to have joined us, Simantini. Uh, I didn't know what I was doing there, frankly. I thought I'd be able to participate in some form as an actor, because that's what my focus was. I'd just come back from the NSD and I was trying to find the NSD is the National School of Drama. And I was trying to find my footing as an actress in Mumbai, finding it very difficult. But Shantaji, of course, doesn't take no for an answer. So when she tells you to join in, you join in. And I found that it resonated with me very strongly, the kind of ideas that I heard at that point. And I wanted to be part of it. I didn't know what kind of a role I could play. But at that point, there was a very clear idea of using art as a basis for this experience. We found very quickly that that's not going to work. We don't have the resources for that, the human resources for that. And therefore, we decided to create a somewhat formal system which could be used by teachers without our intervention in their classrooms in all the municipal schools. That was the idea. We wanted to work with the formal school system because we thought that if change is to occur, it has to occur within a system. It cannot be a one off. That kind of change is very, very limited and dependent on the personality of the creator. We didn't want that to happen. We wanted it to be a program that could be used by anyone who wanted to use it. And it has turned out to be us. So that was the origin of the Avehi Abacus project. As we went along, many more people came in. Deepa Balsavar, an illustrator, graphic designer, she came in. Deepa Hari, uh, she used to be a civil servant at one point and then a publisher's editor. Uh, Navina Venkat, an anthropologist by training. Nandini Purandare, who came in a little later. Sandhya Gandhi Vakil, she's a public administrator and a um, town planner. And Noella, who was just introduced to us, Noella D'Souza, and Vasudha Ambiye, a professor of Marathi and a person who has worked for many, many years with with many Adivasi pockets out in and around Maharashtra. Now, this was a very eclectic bunch, and the principle that we followed just stayed the same. We would meet, we would have a certain amount of work that we had done, researched, brought onto the into the meeting. We would discuss what we had worked on. We would find a way to share it with the students. We had to devise a method by which these ideas could be communicated to students in a way that any teacher could handle. So Shantaji used to insist on five sort of segments of every session. We were actually writing a manual for teachers by then. So each session, the manual was divided up into sessions. And each session would be divided into five areas. We would start with an introduction. No, actually, we'd start with a recap of what had been done before, because Shantaji was very clear about that. Her pedagogy was that the child must know what he or she is going to get, must be able to prepare his mind. It should not be a surprise. It's not something that you are suddenly springing on the kid. It's something that should become part of that child's own uh, worldview. The child should know his or her position in reference to what has happened and what is coming. So the recap was very, very important. Then there was an introduction of the new subject that we were going to talk about in the session. There was a certain formal amount of information that would be passed on by the teacher. And then there had to be some kind of response from the students. The student had to get a chance to explore that meaning, that information that she had acquired at that point, to deal with it in her mind, to discuss it, to sort out confusions if any existed, to state her objections if necessary, or her agreement, as the case may be. That process of discussion was the most crucial. that had to be given the most amount of time. That was what we were leading towards, to get people to talk to each other, to listen to what the other is saying, to be able to make your point with clarity and with politeness. And that's what was the real crux of the session. And then there would be a wind up, which would also link to what was going to come. So you already told the student what's going to come next. So the student was always part of the process, never somebody who was a passive receptor. The teacher was a facilitator, was expected to be a facilitator, not a passer of information. The whole idea was to work on thinking, on changing, on discovering yourself, on discovering what you believe in and what you want. Most important, to find a set of values that made sense to you. So that was the process that we were trying to engender. And it was a very, very hard one to do, actually. First, at our level, we first had to get used to the idea. And that's what those 5 or 7, I don't know how many years that was, that we spent in Shantaji's room, 8 of us, 7 of us, 6 of us, depending on who was available, sitting there and just hammering out this thing, how to make this most uh, clearly transmissible. And then it was decided that I would be the face of the transmission and I would be the facilitator within the classroom. We worked with one municipal school in Mahalakshmi, a Hindi medium school, whose teachers, by the way, always stepped out of the class as soon as we walked in and never came into our class. They took it as a tea break for sure. But the kids also, we had to get across to. We really had to try and reach out and find a way to talk to them. We started at that point with a 5 year program. We started in class 3 and went up to class 7. In India, it is usually accepted that most kids will drop out of school by class 7. So, what you want to do, you've got to do it by class 7. Very few, at that point particularly, continued into the higher classes and into higher education, even fewer. So we were dealing with children from class 3 to 5. It was a 3 to 7, a 5 year project using a set of themes that we had worked on. I don't want to talk about the themes in any kind of detail because then I'm unstoppable. I'm sorry. I really get excited about that even now. And but the themes, there were 9 themes in those days, and all coming at coming from the point of view of the child and her exploration, his exploration, his connection with the world. Uh, we worked for those 5 years, taking one single class up from class 3 to class 7. They became our children, quite honestly. We formed connections with them, which we still maintain. We still are in touch with some of them at least. And we saw those kids grow up, quite literally. We saw the changes in their behavior. We saw the changes in their beliefs. And that gave us the firm conviction that this thing works and it can be made to work. So we moved us, we tried to expand. At this point, we were going in with no printed material. We didn't have anything. We just had a session plan which we had worked out, and we took in whatever visual material we could locate ourselves. But then we decided to
So,
put it all down.
Ratna, so you went into the class yourself and
Yes,
conducted those handwritten sessions. Are you saying that? I mean,
yes,
you
yes, yes,
you took the place
yes.
of the teacher.
Yes, I was the facilitator in the classroom, just not just me. Somebody else usually came along with me because we had to, show stuff that we found in the books, and we wanted to. And as it happens, when a discussion starts up, everyone joins in. So it
Yeah,
wasn't a
yeah.
single person kind of situation ever. It was
So
not
there were
formal.
others with you in the class from the team.
Yes, yes, Deepa Balsavar came often, Sandhya Vakil came often. So all these people were, Seema came quite often also. Deepa Hari didn't come so often because she used to be in the back end trying to prepare for the next session and putting things together for that. Deepa and Navina were our researchers and our sort of, the people who formulated the ideas along with Chandaji. They worked even harder than us. And so this would be something that we would do once a week, sometimes twice, depending on when we were given permission, but usually once a week. And we would go in and conduct class for about an hour for 5 years.
So
Yeah, Nandini.
when did the upscaling begin? What were the
Uh,
challenges? And there were three classes that you were talking about: fifth, sixth, and seventh. There
Fifth,
were
sixth,
there
and
were
seventh.
three. There were so
No,
many
no, no, no.
languages.
Five, five, five. In those days, there used to be five classes. As
Five.
long as we were in the one school, it was five classes from class three to class seven.
I see. So
But
then,
but the
huh,
scale up happened, and that was
yeah,
with 25 schools
yeah.
in and around the same area. This time we had prepared some material, hand drawn, handwritten, typed out, etc. And teachers used our material. Now that was the crux of our work. How do teachers use this material in class? We needed to see that. We knew that it works, but would the teacher be able to do what we were able to do? Would they be interested in doing what we were doing? So first with 25 schools, and then with 200 schools. Now this happened soon after we finished our pilot project of the first 5 years. That would be from say about 90 to 95. Post 1995, we went into this light expansion. We were still cyclostyling sessions. We were still hand drawing and hand painting and all kinds of things. There used to be a little cottage industry going around in our office with dozens of people sitting there just drawing and copying the visual material. And that's when we decided that we are going to publish this work, and we're going to do it in a slightly different form. It would be a 3-year project then. So that is how finally Sangati, the project as we know it now, came into being. Sangati was created as a 3-year project to be used only by teachers. We stepped out completely. So now this was only the teachers and in all municipal schools. So now numbers had scaled up hugely. We were at best with 200 schools. Now we suddenly had to deal with 500, 900. So there was a huge leap there. We had to publish our material, which means we had to put it together in a way that would be accessible to everyone. That took a fairly long time. And by 2000, we were ready. 2001 maybe, we were ready with the Sangati kits as we know them now. These are 6 kits which are used over 3 years. So that means schools do 2 kits per year, and teachers use this material within the classroom. We have a group of representatives, Sangati representatives, who go into classrooms and help the teachers if necessary. Mainly, they see to it that the classes are taken, and in case the teacher needs any kind of information, any kind of support, that's what they do. They talk to the children, they take back responses. The feedback forms are maintained by them. We had a baseline study which told us what the level of the children was, so we had to do a follow up of that. We have had several people evaluating our work. So those were people who used to come into class and speak to the children also. So this is how we collected our idea of what was happening within the classroom, since none of us was going into the classrooms now, and
So
talking to the teachers. So that was, in a nutshell, our entire experience of putting together Sangati.
So how did you transfer what you were doing to the teachers? How did you build the capacity of the teachers? How did you work with the teachers to disseminate our material in the classroom? And so that must have been quite a challenge. I know, because I was part of many of the workshops, and we faced resistance. I mean, it was a whole range of kind of responses that we got from teachers. So can
Yes.
you tell our viewers about a little bit about that phase of the project?
Yes, yes, certainly. It was the most difficult phase of the project and the least interesting, I mean, least pleasure giving for sure. Earlier on, it had been an absolute breeze working with children, working with our own understanding and developing that. It was just pure bliss. But now was the serious work, because we had to convince the teachers to use this material. And teachers in public schools are often very, very resistant. They have a lot of
Overburdened also.
overburdened. They have a lot of responsibilities. They had to, I mean, the people who know about India know the kind of situations the teachers find themselves in. They have to do a lot of extra teaching kind of work, a lot of administrative work, election duty, all kinds of rubbish. So there was a huge amount of resistance. There were some who read the material and found it interesting, but it was so different from what they had been exposed to themselves. They had never, teachers also are, they're like performers, aren't they? They're always a bit nervous about going and standing up in front of a class of 30 kids, all shouting, all difficult to control, all quite a few not interested, and to grab attention, to hold that attention, and to communicate ideas. It's a tough job, as any actor will tell you. So, and we work with scripts. These poor teachers had to do it really extempore. The material was given to them, of course, and they were given time to go over it. But it's hard to get your head around something so new and so different from what you are used to. Their own experience of education themselves, they were educated in this process also, which is straight lecture. Everything is given to you as information, no questions asked. You are even given answers. Answers are written on the blackboard. You're never even expected to use your own initiative to answer the questions that are asked at the back of the textbook. Seriously textbook driven stuff. And here you were asking the teacher to practically tell stories and perform and conduct discussions. It was a tough call on them. And so we decided to go with some teacher training workshops. And these workshops were really motivating workshops. I mean, there's no point trying to teach a teacher who's been teaching for 25 years. I mean, what can I tell her about how to handle a classroom or the pedagogy of it? But what we found was necessary was a reorientation and a chance to relook at the way in which we acquire information. That was what our focus of the teacher workshops used to be. And we conducted workshops in every single ward in Mumbai. Seema can give us figures if you are interested in that. But it was an enormous venture. I remember that. It really was tough. And teachers come in with their own attitudes and sometimes pretty resistant and vocal about it.
uh, Ratna, we are going to have to, start taking questions from the audience also, and
Yeah.
we have to look at the watch. So,
Yes. I'm
I
sorry.
have one last question for you, and then we'll go on. You talked about the diversity of the people who came into the team: economists and educators and filmmakers and editors and children's uh, illustrators, and you as an actor. So how did this program, or how did you bring your skill as an actor to the program, and what did you take away as an actor from the program? Can you give us a very brief idea, and then we have some interesting questions here.
Sure. Um, well, it was a wonderful experience for me. I wouldn't have changed it for anything in the world. Uh, what I brought to this program, I think my ability as a performer, as a storyteller. We use a lot of stories. We use that as a way to start discussion. We use that as stories as a way to introduce new ideas. We use stories to get kids to think, to change their minds, to argue, etc. So the storyteller aspect that I could provide as a performer, I think that was a very useful contribution. And what I took away, immense things, immense. My whole worldview, my way of looking at life, my understanding of myself, my ability to deal with my own family, my own children, the children around me. And finally, as an actor, to be able to empathize and to think in a different way every time I approach a role. Uh, of course, as an actor, you often think in terms of what you would look like, how you would behave, what your manner would be. But it's more than that, isn't it? When you are given a part, it's how that person, this part, how this character feels inside, how that character thinks. You have to learn how to change the way in which you think. I can't use Ratna as a model for Maya Sarabhai or as a model for Sunita Kapoor. Now, that ability to see the world from different points of view and to create empathy for all the various kinds of people that you meet. I think Abacus has been an enormous um, contributor to my ability to do this. And my understanding of the world almost entirely comes out of Abacus.
Lovely. So I'm going to open these questions. I mean, there are some interesting questions that have come in. The first one is, what transformation did you see in the children after your pilot project that provided the impetus for institutionalizing and expanding the program?
Again, where do I begin? There are so many stories about this, and such interesting stories and such meaningful stories, because the children that we worked with, particularly in that first school, that's what I'm going to base my answer on, because that's when I actually worked with the kids. I'll tell you about one particular. At that point, one of the segments of our course was to do with shelter as a important human need, absolutely basic need. All of us need shelter, and in a city like Mumbai, shelter is an enormous issue. Most people live in the most appalling conditions, and the children we deal with come from those kind of appalling conditions, and their worldview is very different from the worldview of children of my society, of my class of individuals. And they know much more about real life than I did at that point. We were in class 3, I think. We were talking about shelter. And there was something about how land cannot be expanded and how you have to deal with land in a particular way. We were always trying to create a way of looking at the world, forming values so that social justice and equality could be served. So, this was part of that discussion. How do you see to it that everyone gets the shelter that one needs, that the uh, basic needs are fulfilled? So here we go. We are talking about land and how it's limited and all that. And one young man, Bharat, I remember, pipes up from the back and says, "No, no, no, no. Land can be increased. What are you talking about? Of course, land can be increased." And we said, "How can it be increased? It's a finite." "No, no, no, no. You pay money. You can build a second floor above you." That was his version of the world. That's what he had seen and he had understood. And the complete acceptance of this kind of corruption, which even a child in class 3 could, you know, talk about so easily. It just took all of us by surprise. Of course, we laughed because it was a joke for a while, but it really disturbed us. So we started talking more about shelter. And eventually we were talking about how does one plan a town? Something happened within the classroom, and this town planning exercise took place right there and then in the classroom. All desks were moved back. A square or a rectangle was made in the middle of the class with a piece of chalk, and the kids decided how to divide up their. This was their city, and they decided to develop it the way they wanted to. To start with, everyone huddled together in their own little communities. Best friends wanted homes together, near each other, etc. And then suddenly somebody said, "Arey, magar school ki to zarurat. We will need a school, won't we?" And yeah, sure. So we had to put in a school. But what about a bus station? We'll need buses to travel. So, and what about a market? So a market came in. And what about a religious place? I know we need a mandir or we need a masjid. So how did they? Suddenly, this entire little township developed, and then services were talked about. How do you provide services for a town like this? Is there any other way of planning a town so that services can get to everyone? I mean, this is just extraordinary. We are in class 3. Kids in class 3 are developing a whole township for themselves using principles that any professional town planner would use. And the understanding of that inside of them, the change that took place was very gentle but very clear eventually. And as it happened, the a few of them kept in touch with us over the years, and we saw how they had developed, of course, over the 5 years that we were with them. But what happened to them afterwards? There was a young man called Gulshan who used to be in class, and Gulshan told us afterwards he played tennis very well. He lived next to a tennis court and had picked up some tennis, and he eventually became a tennis coach. He wanted to study further, he could not because he had younger siblings to look after. And they decided to educate their youngest sister, Shahnaz, and that's what was the focus of the family. So Shahnaz is the one who got an education, whereas Gulshan and Firoz, the two brothers, decided to take up jobs and get down to the process of earning a living. And Gulshan told us many years later, in the 2000s, in fact, he came over to see us and he said that, when I got married, there were two things I showed my wife. One was, in fact, his wife came along and she told us this, that when we got married, two things Gulshan showed us. One was the family album and one was his Sangati workbook. We used to give them worksheets and stories and all kinds of information, children's material that they could go back with. He had compiled it all into a file and preserved it all those years. And I mean, the stories like this are across the country. When we have worked with people in Rajasthan, we have come across these kind of stories. Stories about people in Uttar Pradesh. So many young boys in Uttar Pradesh wrote back to us and said, I have asked my parents not to get my sister married so early. I think she should study. She should. And I will see to it that she studies. These are young kids, class maybe 8, 9. We had talked with them about gender. Our kit on gender, Saath Saath, was used in both Rajasthan and UP. And we found such extraordinary stories from these kids of actions that they could take in their own lives. And that, I think, is the true empowerment that I can see. That is the real contribution that Abacus made.
Um, so this is relevant because the school systems in India and many parts of the world collapsed during the last 2 years. How did Abacus as a project deal with the whole pandemic, and what are the learnings of the pandemic for us as educators?
I could take that on.
Yeah.
That Ratna mentioned about our team, and that has been one of the team, the people that go to the schools and be in touch with the children and teachers and help the children to understand how to look at their workbooks and complete them, and help the teacher in conducting some complex activities sometimes. So it's the rapport that the team has built with the teachers as well as the children that somehow kind of gave us a footing to, I would say, kind of look at our work and model it slightly differently, because we are not a community organization. We are very clearly based in the formal education system where we work with the teachers. We don't believe in replacing the teachers, so we don't have a presence otherwise. But it is this connect over last more than a decade where we just felt that all we can do is to talk to the children to find out how they are in these difficult times. And the stories that came out of that were absolutely shattering. And we continued that, and we felt that there was something that we needed to do, look at ourselves, not just in formal theoretical terms of not wanting to interfere in the teachers teaching and stuff like that. Here was a time where we needed to kind of refresh our mind. So our people started going to the communities when they could walk or take a rickshaw as the lockdown gradually started easing out, and taking our material, conducting sessions, giving an opportunity to children basically to open out and to construct their ideas in terms of the new experiences, to look at the ideas about health and hygiene and all those things in a completely new way, where they had a completely different experience, having the shock of how badly the system is there for us. And so this is one way that our people reached out. In fact, teachers have said that nobody during that time had the courage to go out and step out in um, crowded places, although our people did take whatever care they could. So that was one thing. Gradually, the schools were starting to do some sort of online teaching, but we knew that there were very few children who could join in, and that really couldn't get even the teachers anywhere, because teaching, unless and until you are sufficiently supported and your capacities are built, you can't suddenly transfer your teaching medium to digital mode. And so we felt that of course we should remain connected there, but we developed a separate workbook. Ratna worked on it particularly, and we developed workbook based on our the first theme of our kit, health and ourselves and our needs, and to give it to places where there was no other way to reach out, and then remained in touch with the children by paying visits there and doing feedback, and those experiences have shown us a lot of learning. At the same time, we when the schools reopen, and we hope that happens soon and things come back to whatever the new normal is going to be, we would like to go back to working alongside the teachers rather than taking on their roles. So this is something we would like to do. We would also like to use our material, which is already in digital format, in soft copies, and in 3 different languages for teachers, in 8 different languages for children, to look at the possibility of developing something which is, which is can be done in a MOOC kind of a platform with self-learning, but with the same philosophy and orientation of not giving something ready-made, but to create new meanings that are contextual. This is something that we have been trying out recently. Again, I mean, another booklet, workbook rather, was developed by on the issue of gender, taking off from our kit of Saath Saath by and so we are waiting to now start using that.
I wanted to say that, we have our representatives, as Seema said, have been in touch continuously with the students and collected a lot of feedback. It really is worth reading that, because it is amazing how mature these children are and how they have struggled and kept their sanity through these really difficult months that have gone by. They talk constantly about the lack of food. They talk constantly about how stressed their mothers are because they are unable to feed them. They talk about fathers out of work who have turned, they talk about fights within the family. They talk about fights between neighbors. I mean, this has been a deeply unpleasant time for many, many children. Don't forget, we talk to kids who live in one room houses, tiny little 10 by 10 holes, maybe with 6, 8, 10 family members in there. No place to go outside, no place to play. I mean, this is inhuman. And nothing that the government could do for them except hand out a little bit of food, often poor quality and insufficient. It really has been a shocking experience for all of us. And yet, their innate wisdom, their innate sense of
Tenacity.
enthusiasm, tenacity. They all talk about coming out of it. They all talk about what school will be like after. And we'll have to keep washing our hands and we'll have to keep a distance from our friends. We won't be able to hug them. We won't be able to. Oh, I. It's overwhelming. It really is. But I'd like to read out something that one of the girls who used to be a student in Abacus, in the schools in and had studied the course Sangati while she was a student, and she grew up and now apparently is a teacher in municipal schools teaching Sangati herself. And she says something that it's really beautiful. She says that each Sangati class is nothing less than a counseling session. Every class for her is filled with laughter, games, and joy that facilitate a whole variety of learning. Through this, she believes, not only will students be able to learn effectively, but will also remember the classes and their lessons for the rest of their lives. Now, this is something that we hear over and over again in the feedback of the students. That I don't know what happened in the other classes, but I remember what happened in Sankati. Because there are stories. There are stories that connect to me. There are stories which tell me something that makes me think about my own life. Another thing I'd like to read out, a student who writes, this is part of the work that was
We
happening during the lockdown. This is a young girl called Pooja Shivaji Kalse. She is a class 7 student in a Marathi medium school. So I'm going to read the English translation. She says, I'm going to tell you a story about myself. The name of the story is When I Get Angry. When I get angry, I isolate myself in a corner. I don't talk to anyone. If I really get angry, I back answer. Whatever the age or position of the person may be, I just give it back. I get very upset when I'm teased. If such a thing happens to me, my sister and I have a duel. We pull each other's hair. The auntie in our neighborhood always plays loud music and no one complains. But if we do the same, she doesn't like it. So then we get into big arguments with her. Sometimes we have a roaring fight with her. This is how I behaved in just a few days. I used to proudly justify such behavior to all. Then one day, the Sangati teacher told us Pranjal's story. This is, oops, somebody should put their thing on mute. Mic on mute, please. Seema, maybe you?
No.
No? Oops, really loud. Anyway, so one day the Sangati teacher told us Pranjal's story, in which Pranjal is also feeling very angry and confused about how to express himself. He would be continuously irritable with every small and big thing. The teacher suggested a few ways to overcome anger, like counting to 10, distracting yourself by occupying yourself with something you like to do, to apologize if you are at fault, and many other ways to deal with anger. So I thought for myself about how I could use these ideas. I tried out things for a week or two. Now, when I expect me and my siblings are about to start a fight, I busy myself with studies. I sit quietly for a while. I count to myself from 1 to 10 and the other way backwards. If the next door auntie plays loud music, I also listen to the songs. She asked me why I have stopped playing music, and I told her I'm happy listening to the music you play. And she now has changed and plays the music with lower volume. I'm really happy that I have been able to control my anger. Everyone is curious to know how this change has happened. Now, I mean, these kind of stories from all of them talking about how they have been able to change as individuals, how they have been able to learn to think better, to express themselves better. One child says that I'm so proud of the way that I can write now. He wrote out a sentence that he had written and said, see how well I'm writing. I'm able to think like that. I'm very proud of myself. So this is the kind of work that gives us the courage to go on. And these are the kind of things that during the pandemic stood with the kids. Okay. Anything else?
Nandini, you're on mute. Nandini, you're on mute.
we are kind of running out of time, Ratna, but there's so much to talk about. But can we touch upon how Asha has helped us
Oh
in
yeah.
I mean supporting us, and what are the kind of challenges? I mean something about the problems of funding and raising funds. It's a big one. It's not
Big
a
one.
very pleasant one to talk about, but yeah,
But very
Yeah. So
important, because that's
very
what we are
important.
hoping will come
Yes.
out after this, that you would all, everyone who's watching would be happy to support Asha do more of the work that they are doing, because they have been an immense support to me, us, all of us in the Abacus project. I think Seema should answer this question because she has more of the details of the kind of support Asha has given us.
yeah. So see, the thing is that the project as scale requires resources, and let me clarify that. more than 90% of the resources, about 90, more than 95% of our resources are they go into the Abacus project, which is in the Bombay Municipal Corporations and in the Adivasi Ashram Shalas. So Asha's contribution is really unique. One is that they have been a consistent support over several years, more than a decade now. And that gives us this kind of a firm ground to be able to negotiate in terms of whenever we've had sudden crisis with some funding agencies backing out, Asha has stepped in. So that's the kind of support. I won't say no questions asked. We would like more questions so that we can clarify things for ourselves. But there are no strict guidelines as to you must use our funds only for this and not for admin. And so there is that trust and camaraderie and companionship that is there with Asha, which is amazing. I mean, that's what the kind of confidence that we have to be able to run our project year after year on such a large scale. And oftentimes, we don't worry about whether there is going to be money, whether from Asha or from anywhere else. When we feel that we should divert our resources and work, not using any resources from the organization, work in order to address a certain need that we perceive, we try to do that, and Asha has been supporting us in that thought process. That is something which is very, very unique. I want to particularly talk about one important thing. See, when we started working with one school in 1990, in the beginning of the 90s, the country was a very different place, and everybody wanted to work in formal education system to show efficacy of their work within the system. Having done that for first 5 years when Ratna was teaching, then after that working with the teachers, one of the in 25 schools, which is the most difficult phase of our work, because teachers were asking questions as to if you are so great and your work is so good, then why not everywhere? And that's a question that we asked ourselves. And finally, that's where we are working with the entire system so that we experience the system as a whole with its challenging and its possibilities, right? And so that journey has been possible because of Asha, because over the years, there is a tendency for organizations to adopt schools rather than strengthen the public education system. And it's that tendency that has seen decline in the support, the financial support that we've had. There used to be, a time where there was a much more groundswell for supporting work like us in the public education system without us taking that initiative. Today, that itself is a challenge, and that's where Asha's contribution is, I mean, it's not just immense, you can't put it in words. And this is
Yes,
not just
because
because we are doing this program, because it is the vision of a certain kind of the world that we are part of, and not just financial arrangement.
yes, I would like to add here that people are very happy to give money to donate money to put computers into classrooms or put fans into classrooms, or give books to kids or something like that. But what we are trying to do is significantly different. We are talking about changing minds. We're talking about discovering one's value system. Now, these are nebulous things. We can't quantify them. So when we go to a funder and we say, okay, we need money for the work we are doing, they say, but then show us results. How do you show the results? How do I tell them Gulshan's story, just one story, and say that on the
Even if
basis
it
of
is
this, we
several
need money?
stories, so what?
Correct.
So
But it's
what?
still,
Gulshan is not a CEO in a company in Seattle. I mean, if that is the measure of success ultimately for our society, we will be happy if economically there is that gain, obviously, but we would like gains distributed equitably, right? And that is possible when there is a new way of looking at the way we use nature's resources, the way we look at
yes,
knowledge and things in
yes.
completely different way.
And this changing of the mindset starts with the teacher. I first need to change the teacher's mindset so that I can get across to the students,
I wish
right?
you
I
would
mean,
talk a
when
little
I
bit
say,
about Manthan, just to, I mean, to orient
yes,
people about Manthan. That would be
Yes,
nice.
because that's another. But I'd like to finish one other thing.
Yeah.
The other real resource that we have is our representatives. These are people who have been with us for now 20, 25 years. This is extraordinary. In a organization like this, where we can barely give them enough money to, provide for their needs, I wish we could give them twice what we are giving them, because their contribution, the way those girls have gone into classrooms and stood up to the teachers' viciousness sometimes. They've been asked to leave the classroom, get out of here, is the kind of stuff that they have been told. They've been really treated badly by some of the teachers, and yet to go back in with a smiling face the next day and say, I'm back here, can I help you? Can we do the class again? Can we take up this session? With the children prompting them and saying, yes, yes, we want the session. I mean, those scenes are quite incredible. They almost sound, I sometimes when I talk about it, I feel like I'm making it up. It sounds like a story, but it is true. Our girls have done this. Our representatives have worked that hard, and we've been able to retain these people really because of people like Asha who have stood by us for such a long period of time. That is truly crucial. And yes, also along with Sangati, which is one program that we have developed, most important to us also is the program called Manthan, which was developed as as a response to the felt need of working with teachers, the desire to make teachers go through the same experience of transformation, of learning to think differently about the world. And I think Seema can tell us a little more briefly about Manthan.
How are we doing for time?
Not
Uh,
very good.
yeah, so Manthan came out of the need to, as Ratna said, for enabling, pre-service level teachers, people who become, who are in the pre-service institute before they're appointed as teachers, where, formal life and other rules and regulations, elections and census and things take over.
Some
Yeah, I
problem with
think.
your audio. Better now.
Yeah, problem with my bandwidth. And so the questions that teachers asked us during the first time we took the program out to 25 schools, where we learned that it is not the formal content that we needed to support the teachers, or interesting pedagogy, but a worldview. The worldview, and also the essence of how knowledge is created differently, thinking not in a given rationality of things, but thinking differently in contextual manner, with empathy, asking questions, because that's what social science knowledge essentially is, to build knowledge based on what is there in the classrooms. And that is how we created Manthan. In fact, I would be happy to say that a whole lot of work that we have done in schools has fed into policy, both at the national level when the 2005 national education curriculum was developed, as well as the teacher education curriculum. A material is fed into the textbooks as well as resource material, as references in the teacher education at national level, and it filtered down to the state level. So earlier, the resistance that we faced from the schools, from the teachers, is slightly less. In fact, I would say much less. First credit goes to the team that we have, the people who go to the schools and work with the teachers. And the second one is that there is much more, there has been now, since 2005 to now, much more consonance in the manner in which we look at knowledge and value systems. And so that's been one of the things. Things are very difficult, of course, even today, particularly with the teacher training colleges. The pressures are of a different nature, but that's another story.
I think we are pretty, we've overshot our time for
So
sure.
no, there is a couple of questions for you, Ratna, particularly. How do you balance time?
Okay. Okay, with not too much difficulty. One, I never got too much work when I was much younger as an actor, which worked quite nicely for Abacus because I had plenty of time to do this work, and it was work that I enjoyed very deeply. I work in the theatre quite a lot, and that gives me more flexibility towards during the day. That was one of the big advantages. And film work is episodic, once in a while you get it. Um, so it is always possible to do what you want to do if you really want to do it. For me, Abacus has fed into my way of dealing with the world. And therefore, it's of prime importance to me. It's something that I definitely do want to do. It gives meaning to my life in a way that a lot of the other work that I do in film and television doesn't. So it's something that I do very easily, very happily, and without losing out on anything. It's easy in India. We have so much other support. We have family support. We have support of people who help us, work with us, cook, looking after kids. All that gets taken in somehow. I had a good mother and a good mother-in-law that helped. So all that contributed to, and that's not true for just for me. Everyone else in the group, all eight of us, had other things that were going on the side. I mean, nobody was giving full-time focus on Abacus. Not even Simantini, who's our director, but she was busy making her own films and writing and all kinds of other stuff. So we've all learned to multitask, and quite happily so, and have benefited greatly from it.
Great. So, are there any more questions? Sorry. Ratna, there is one last interesting question here saying, what was the difference in engagement when you were personally working with students in the pilot versus when we went public with teachers and working with them? Was there a huge shift, is the question here.
Shift for me, of course, because
Uh,
I
no,
lost all I
Basically,
lost all
yeah.
the fun part of it. Going into class and working with the kids there was the really wonderful, extraordinary, engaging, challenging part of the experience, and I missed out on that. But what I have discovered and what has happened for the whole organization is that the process then became focused on trying to get the teachers to take ownership of this project. And that is what seems to have happened gradually over the years. And today, we saw during the pandemic that the teachers in municipal schools were actually asking for Sangati classes to be held. They were asking for our representatives to come in and interact with the students. They were asking for our help. Now, that really is the best gift and the best validation that we have got for the work that we have done all these years. Some changes, of course, because now one is usually dealing with the representatives, trying to help them to do their work more efficiently and more smoothly. But yes, I really miss going into the classroom, for sure.
Okay, so I think Ankur is here to maybe wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you so
Before
much.
Before Ankur
Mhm,
does, may I make one final comment?
mhm.
I don't know how many people are watching from India, particularly. I hope some are, and I hope some will watch later. But somehow I find world over, and particularly in our country, the idea of charity is a very odd and very disturbing idea for me. We like to give as charity. We don't like to give as a right or a duty. I feel that maybe that shift is what is required. Charity somehow is to feed your ego. Duty is to do the right thing. So if there are people out there who want to give to Asha for the kind of work that they are doing, and all of us are in real need of support because the world is changing rapidly, and the place for discussion, the place for democracy even seems to be shrinking day by day. So if we want to keep a hold on that, if we don't want to lose everything that we have worked and strived for and managed to acquire over the last 50, 70 years of human experience, if that is not to change and become a morass of violence and dictatorship and all kinds of other things that we are seeing all around us, then we have to give back as a sense of duty. Whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's ideas, everything is required. And one must get out of this sense of charity, which is particularly unpleasant in India, at least to me. Sorry, I've said my bit.
It's so hard, Ratna, to follow right after your so awesome statements. Thank you so much, Ratna, Simantini, and Nandini. This is a really, really insightful session. I wish we had even more time. It was so good to listen all the stories. It was so good to kind of hear Gulshan's story around Sangati workbook, Pooja's story on transition. It was so good to hear the some live examples, and I really enjoyed, or was really impressed by how Avehi is trying to bring a systematic change, mindset changing, and rather than kind of just fulfilling a short-term need. So that really, really well articulated. Thank you so much for bringing this awareness to this audience. We are fortunate that Asha could serve as a foundation, as a platform to bring awareness about this project and all the work that has been doing to our audience. We hope that you got better awareness and you got more insights on what goes in the back on bringing such a reform change. Thank you so much who are watching us online or who would watch this later on. And again, a big thanks to Ratna, Samantini, and Nandini for finding time to host this session for us. And with
Do
that,
check out
thank
our website. I really
yes.
recommend that you check out our website. There's much more information, and it is a really interesting idea. I mean, even though I say so myself, it is really an interesting way of looking at education. So please do check out our website.
And it seems to be working.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the inspirational stories. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to all of our audience. We hope you have a great day ahead and you'll continue to support Avehi as well as Asha going forward. Have a great one, everyone. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Ankur, and thank you everyone at Asha, and thank you everyone.